This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
We were now in the computer age, so we had to print these weird characters that were probably never printed in a magazine before. They would not spend a single penny that didn't absolutely have to be spent.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. David Duberman was an editor at Antic magazine, one of the two major Atari magazines in the United States. Later, he was in customer support at Synapse Software, then user group coordinator at Atari during the Tramiel era. This interview took place on June 17, 2016. In it, we discussed Jim Capparell, whom I previously interviewed.
I was at Antic at first. That was my first computer-related job. Before that, I was actually working as a baker, and I had recently moved to San Francisco and was starting to become aware of the whole video game revolution. I was really interested in the fun aspect of video games, as well as the creative aspects, the multimedia-related aspects, the combination of attractive, enticing graphics and sound with compelling interactivity was a no-brainer for me, and I just picked up on that right away and started getting really interested in it, and learned. I remember I was at a store in downtown San Francisco one day, and I picked up a brochure for a VIC-20. The store didn't even have the VIC-20 in. It was a Commodore VIC-20, and I'm not sure. I believe that came out before the Commodore 64. I'm not sure. Do you remember, Kevin?
Yes, the VIC-20 was out a couple of years before the 64.
Yeah, so I saw the brochure for the VIC-20, and it looked amazing to me. It looked I really wanted it. But I tend to research a decision, especially, at that time, it was a fairly costly decision thing for me to get into. So I did a fair amount of research into the whole home computer situation. This was, of course, before the PC. IBM had yet to release their PC, so they were called home computers at the time. There was the Radio Shack Tandy TRS-80 that I had been taking a programming course at City College of San Francisco, and had been. Another big phenomenon at the time were magazines. You could buy these magazines. One was called Soft Side, another one was called Compute, that you could type, and they had listings that you could type into your computer, whether it was an Apple or a Radio Shack or whatever. And that it was probably from one of these that I learned about the Atari 800. And at the same time, a lot of stuff coming together here. So let me, if I say anything that you're not sure about, don't hesitate to interrupt me and let me know if there's anything I can clarify. But at the same time, I was in. Where are you based, Kevin?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay, my sister lives there. Nice city.
Yeah.
I was in San Francisco, and I remember there was this computer store on Geary Boulevard. It's long gone, but I went into this computer store and I saw a copy of a magazine called Antic, and hadn't heard of it, didn't know anything about it. Took it off the shelf, looked at it. Hey, this is an Atari computer magazine published in San Francisco. Amazing. So I bought it without delay, and this was I had ordered, by this point I had decided to buy an Atari 800 with a memory expansion and an 810 disk drive, and floppy drive held, you probably know better than I, what was it,
88K.
What?
It was about 88K.
88K, yeah. Right. So, and of course you could flip it over and double the capacity. But So I had ordered that. It was not available, I don't think, in San Francisco, but I had ordered it from a place in the Midwest somewhere, a mail order place, and it was incredibly expensive. It was well over $1,000. I still have the receipt somewhere, the invoice from the company. I'll have to try and dig it up sometime. And it was. I remember I also ordered a box of 10 Elephant 5 1/4 inch floppy disks that was like $45 or something like that. Crazy. So I bought Antic, and I was waiting for my computer to come, and I looked in Antic, and I saw, published in San Francisco. Here's a phone number. I gave him a call and said, I'm really interested in the Atari computer. I'd love to work for you guys. I'll be happy to come down there, volunteer, whatever you need. And I had done. I was basically coming at this by way of being a technical writer, and my experience in technical writing, I'll just give it to you a real lightning summary, was I had written an article for a fine art photography publication about photo etching. So, I had talked to an artist. He described his process for me, and I wrote that up, and it was published in this magazine. So that was my experience, and I went to the Antic at that time. This was before the second issue came out, so it was in 1981, 82, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was being published at that time out of Jim Capparell's apartment on Potrero Hill. And so I went down to the apartment, and it was busy. They were publishing a magazine out of there. It was a real office, although it was Jim's apartment. And
at this point, were you angling to eventually get a job, or were you just interested because it was Atari stuff?
I wanted to get a job. Yeah, as soon as I started learning about this stuff, I knew that this is what I was meant for. To work in, hopefully, in the creative side of computing.
Okay. First issue of Antic was April 1982. So when it was the cover date, anyway. So.
Of the first issue.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I still have a copy of that around somewhere. So this is probably around that time because, typically magazines come out a month or two before the cover date. So
right.
This is probably, April or May of 1982. So, and I wanted to get a job. I talked to Jim on the phone, and he said, come on down. And so I did. So I went to his house and, basically interviewed for the job. It was very informal. And I said, I'd be willing to volunteer, just do whatever you need. You don't have to pay me. And he said, no, we'll pay you $5 an hour. So I got hired right away. And my job was listings coordinator, something like that. I forget. It was technical. It wasn't technical editor, but it's technical associate, I believe that was my official title.
Okay.
And my job was to get the listings that were accepted for publication in Antic and get them ready for publication in Antic. And anybody that has done Atari Basic on an 800 computer, Atari 8-bit computer, knows about the ATASCII character set. And very often those need to be present in listings. So that was the big challenge of being the listings editor at Antic, was getting those special characters to print as part of a listing. And that was the thing. We were contracted with a publishing house. I'm not sure exactly what the name of their role was, but the company was named Miller Freeman, and they were the ones that did all the typesetting of the magazine. This was before, way before desktop publishing or anything like that. So we were published using a very traditional method, although we were now in the computer age, so we had to print these weird characters that were probably never printed in a magazine before. And we worked with Miller Freeman and eventually solved that problem. And that was what I remember from the very early days at Antic. I can go on, or if you want to ask some questions.
No. just I'm interested, just what it was like working there at Antic, and any more stories or memories you have. We could just kind of go on that for a while.
Sure. As I say, initially we worked out of Jim's apartment, and I remember shipping a magazine, getting it in from the publisher, getting tons of boxes of magazines from the publisher shipped to Jim's apartment, and putting them in other boxes to ship out to distributors to go to Atari stores and computer stores and stuff like that. And just producing the magazine and hiring. We were really ramping up at this point, so we were hiring a bunch of people. And eventually, before very long, we moved down the street to an office over a bar. And I'm sure you've heard this interview with Jim. He talks about that. So there's not really a whole lot I can add to that aspect of it. And that was when we were really ramping up, and we had our shipping department was out of a garage downstairs next to the bar, and then we went to the really big time, and we moved to a real office in near downtown San Francisco on 2nd Street, right around the corner from South Park, which is not the South Park that's, the Parker Stone animated series, but it's a real place that was called South Park way before that series ever started. Have you ever heard of it, Kevin?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, it's a cool little neighborhood. It was kind of funky then. It's become very gentrified since then. And that office that we moved to, I'm not sure where Jim went after that, because that was the office. That was the last place that I worked for Antic. But I know that same office, and I would be interested to know if you're aware of this, Kevin. After Capparell left, it became the where Wired was started.
Right. Yeah, I was aware of that. I think Jim had mentioned that. So yeah, it has a long legacy of pushing out great tech magazines.
Yeah. So, I'll just basically, I ended my time at Antic at that 2nd Street office, and I can tell you, what happened after that, but just a couple of other memories. One of my principal memories of my time at Antic was my first CES, my first trade show period ever that I went to, any kind of trade show. We had a booth at CES, and I don't remember a whole lot about what went on at that point. That was very early. That was probably 82. That was probably the summer of 82. But that was very exciting. And if anything else comes to mind from my time at Antic, I will let you know.
Sure.
But anyway, so after a couple of years,
so looking at the list before we go on, looking at the list of articles you wrote for Antic, I mean, it's clear that you moved on from being the listings wrangler to being a regular writer. You did a lot of reviews. You did some tech tips and things, but there were a lot of reviews, and I'm curious how that worked. I imagine, were you assigned these things, or was it just like a table filled with stuff that companies sent you and you just grabbed something and reviewed it? How did that go?
Yeah, more like the latter. I just realized I have been terribly remiss in not mentioning the name of my absolutely favorite person of all time at Antic, who Jim has mentioned in his interviews as well. His name was on the masthead as Robert DeWitt as the editor, but his real name was DeWitt Robeloff. And DeWitt was a complete sweetheart, and an incredibly hard worker, and very knowledgeable, experienced editor, and interested in the whole scene. And so I became, we were kindred souls, and I became very friendly with DeWitt right off the bat, and and I was into, and stuff. When you have a magazine, or when you work for a computer magazine, people are always sending you crap to review, software, hardware, anything. And and in these days, the ethical standards are much higher. In those days, there were no ethical standards, and they would just send you, a floppy drive to review, and you would review it and keep it. So free goods. And so all this stuff was coming in, and I was really interested in everything that you could do with the computer, especially with related to multimedia type stuff and fun type stuff. So if something, and being sort of in the editorial elite at the magazine, such as it was, 3 of us or whatever it was. I could basically just pick and choose. If something came in and I was interested in reviewing it, I would just tell DeWitt, "Hey, let me review this," and he would say, "Sure," something like that.
Cool.
So I was interested in reviewing this stuff. I've always been sort of a fan of critical thinking, a fan of cultural criticism. From way back, I used to read Rolling Stone magazine when that first came out, probably way before you were born. I used to read that, all the record reviews in there. I would read movie reviews in the Village Voice and stuff like that, and just really marvel at the way these people could write. And I never felt like I could do a very good job with most of the stuff that I enjoy as far as writing review, except for computer stuff. For some reason, I had a knack. I was able to come to grips with whatever the product was, and I think a lot of it has to do with my aptitude for being a technical writer, which I'm not sure if you know, but the bulk of my career post Atari and Antic was at Autodesk as a writer of the documentation for 3D Studio Max.
Okay. No, I didn't know.
Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah. So that was what that was kind of my career at Antic kind of prepared me for my career at Autodesk, because I learned from doing that the best way to really come to grips with something, whether it's a new piece of software, a programming trick, or whatever, is just to do it. Just to roll up your sleeves, get your arms dirty, make mistakes, and learn by doing. That's not exactly a revolutionary, an enlightening revelation. So basically, yeah, I would get this stuff and volunteer to review it, and they didn't have to pay me any extra to do it the way they did for an outside reviewer. So yeah, that was fine with them.
Nice. So you eventually had a title of some sort of editor?
Yeah, I was eventually. I got to the point where I believe I was assigning reviews to outside writers and editing those reviews when they would come back in.
Nice. So why did your time at Antic come to an end?
Just parting of the ways. That's all I'm going to say. Just had a parting of the ways, and I was still on good terms with those guys. Oh, another interesting thing that I did. Let's see, at Atari, my title was user group coordinator, but at Antic, I still attended user group meetings. There was a big user group in San Francisco called Abacus, Atari Bay Area Computer User Society, and that I believe Jim might have started that one. And then there was another one in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, that I used to go to. And at the latter, I hired Jack Powell. I don't know if you've talked to him.
No, I don't think so. Not yet.
Jack Powell, I basically hired Jack Powell to take my place as the listings coordinator so that I could move on to more other editorial duties. But Jack was the one who helped, Yoast, what is it? Yoast?
Gary.
Yeah, but his company, what was the name of it? Yoast Development Group or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
He started that. He worked for Capparell running his retail operation. The stuff that he sold from the magazine, and there was as you probably know, there was a bunch of eventually accrued. He took over the APX program from Atari, and there was a ton of software, and so out of that, Gary and Tom Hudson started the Yoast Development Group, and they took Jack Powell along with them to write the initial documentation for what was called 3D Studio at the time.
Right.
Basically, I went on to writing more reviews. I guess my main regret is that I didn't get more into the technical side of things, the programming side of things. But there was more than enough to keep me interested and busy in the applications side and the games side.
Cool. All right, so how did you get hired by Atari?
Well, between Antic and Atari was Synapse Software, and I don't know if you want me to even talk about that.
Absolutely. I did not know you worked for Synapse.
Yeah, I through my connections at Antic, I knew the people at Synapse, so I called them up, and they were able to hire me. So you're familiar with Synapse, right?
Absolutely, sure.
Synapse was just, not, I know you already know this, but this is just by way of leading up to what I'm going to say. Synapse was probably for at least a short time, they were the main games company for the Atari 8-bit computers. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, went to the Commodore 64 as well. But they also, for the Atari 8-bit computers, made application software. So they made a communications program, spreadsheet, SynCalc.
Right, SynFile, SynTrend. There was a whole line of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, those being business software, I had no interest in them whatsoever. So of course, that's what Synapse set me to doing, was doing customer support for those products. So that was not, an insanely great job for me, although I also got to do some testing on some of their advanced games that were coming out, some of the newer text adventures that had the special features. Mm-hmm. I remember they were really going after, but it's bringing back a lot of stuff, but they were really going after, do you remember Infocom?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, they were going after Infocom in the interactive fiction space for a while.
Exactly, and they failed miserably, which is too bad because they did come up with some interesting innovations, variations on the theme. But I also around the time that I was working at Synapse, which is 1984, I'm pretty sure, because that's around when the Mindset computer came out. Does that ring a bell at all?
Sure. Yeah.
I was, the Mindset to me was, in fact, it was started by a guy who had left Atari and under Warner's, and he wanted to do a PC, an advanced graphics PC. So he had a special VLSI chip made for super fast graphics. Certainly not high resolution and not high color depth, but really fast. He had a bit blitter. I think that was the primary feature of this VLSI. And the bit blitter was able to move around large chunks of data very quickly, so to do fast graphics. And so I bought a Mindset. I remember you could not buy it in San Francisco at that time. I was living in the city at the time, and I had to go all the way to Silicon Valley to get my Mindset. And I started a user group around the Mindset, and I also, from Synapse, bought. I was working for them, so I got it free. The one and only game I think that ever came out for the Mindset, I believe it was called Vortex. It was not a flight simulator. It was more like a flight arcade game. And it was really cool, but it was pretty limited.
Yeah.
I also remember another product, an interesting, unique product from Synapse that they gave me a copy of because I was working there at the time, but I didn't review it or anything. It was something that was more intriguing. Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was called Relax. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I have a Relax unit. You strap the band to your head, and it measures your brain frequencies or something, and tries to help you relax.
Yeah, it's basically the muscle tension. It measures the muscle tension, the voltaic. It's something, the voltage in your skin or something like that. Yeah. So you still have yours. That's pretty good. I lost track of mine long ago, but that was pretty cool. Although I didn't really do a whole lot with it.
So
do you still use yours?
Well, mine doesn't really work. My little hot air balloon never actually floats away. I don't know if something's wrong with the receivers, but it's fun to play with anyway. So what did you do at Synapse? What was your job?
I did customer support on the business apps.
Oh, okay, right.
And I also did some testing of the interactive fiction.
Let's talk about customer support for a minute. Were there big businesses using these products to get stuff done?
No way. Small businesses, individuals.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think big businesses were probably still using mainframes at that time, or mini computers.
So was there a particularly common problem that was you were always helping people with?
I don't remember. Sorry. I don't remember there was anything that was, an overt problem that kept cropping up across a wide range of users. I think it's, typically more, where does this square black thing go?
Right.
Something like that. But also at the same time, I don't recall how this came about, but I met someone. This was shortly after, when I was working at Synapse, it was shortly after the Tramiels takeover at Atari. And I somehow got in touch with a guy who was doing publications at Atari, Arnold Waldstein, really great guy. And he contracted with me to do some writing, and I don't even remember what it was. Manuals, maybe a software manual or something like that. Mm-hmm. I believe at that time I might also have been working on some on the Atari Connection magazine a little bit. I didn't really do a whole lot on that. I believe I also might have been. Does the name David Heller ring a bell?
Yeah, Dr. Wacko.
Yeah. I think that he was writing a book for Arnold, probably to be published by Atari, and that I did a review of that, which is, no big deal. But anyway, through working with Arnold, I was able to get an Atari job working at Atari as user group coordinator. This was not working with Arnold. It was working with Arnold was someone that was there at Atari before the Tramiels took over. They didn't fire every single person. They kept a few of the staff, and Arnold was one of those holdovers. Someone who came in from Commodore was Neil Harris, who was a marketing guy and a real very intense guy, online gamer. He was into the war games, playing online war games over modems, which didn't interest me at all. So Neil and I were not real good buddies, but he hired me and got me into the marketing department, and I became the user group coordinator.
Ironically, just to interrupt you for a second, my interview with Neil Harris just went online today.
Oh, cool. All right. You send me a link. So sure. I'd like to take that. Yeah, I remember Neil was a real go-getter. For example, one time I remember, the Tramiels came in and they took over Atari on you can't imagine on what a bare-bones basis it was. I mean, they would not spend a single penny that didn't absolutely have to be spent. So I remember one time Neil Harris I came in the morning and he was standing on his desk. And I was saying, what are you doing? He says, I'm rewiring the phones. I want to get a phone in my office. So he had gone, he had taken, these were these floating ceilings, and he had taken off some of the panels and routed some phone wire through. And I had, no idea how he knew how to do something like that, much less how to do it. So my job at Atari was user group coordinator. I would go to user groups, and this was during the ramp up of the ST launch. So I would go and take an ST and demo it to these user groups. I don't remember exactly all the different places I went. I remember I went to Detroit. I went to, I was also with Atari. I went to my first, this was also CES, but it was in Chicago as opposed to Las Vegas. The first one was in Las Vegas. This was in Chicago, so this was when they were really expanding. This was way before Las Vegas was like, the huge convention center that it is now. Chicago was probably a lot bigger. So went to CES as user group coordinator with Atari Chicago, probably 85. I wasn't at Atari very long, so yeah, it was probably 85, and went to the Chicago user group and got a bunch of them to volunteer to help us at the booth, and that was one of my big accomplishments at Atari. And then as I said, I wasn't at Atari very long. I was working for, my supervisor was one of Jack's executives named Jamie Copeland. I'm sure you've heard that name before.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. And Jamie Copeland decided he wanted to make big bucks like his mentor Jack, so he went off and started his own company called Shaner International, Shanner. You would think it would be pronounced Shanner, but no, it's pronounced Shaner. It was named after his two daughters, I believe, Shannon and Erin. He started this company that was basically a distributor, and whatever he could get his hands on, software, hardware, and he hired me to write manuals for the stuff that he was buying and reselling. And I did that, and the company did not do well. He laid me off, and then I think went out of business shortly after that.
You were the sysop of the Atari BBS for a while.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about that.
All right,
sorry.
It's okay.
It was not all that. It's pretty. If you've ever done any of that type of work, it's mostly just administrative, kind of boring, tedious work.
What else? How did your time at Atari come to an end? You got this other job at Shammer and decided that was a better way to go?
Yeah. I figured I had more opportunity for advancement there. But didn't work out that way. So then I started doing manuals freelance. I wrote a manual for True Space. I wrote and published was it after or before? I think it was after. Yeah, around this time, after I was working at Atari, I was working at an Atari store in Silicon Valley for a while, and then I was working, just as a salesman, computer salesman, then at an Amiga store in Silicon Valley, and when I was working at the Amiga store, I wrote and self-published a book of tutorials on Imagine, the 3D graphics software for the Amiga, and did quite well with that. And that sort of launched my career into 3D graphics technical writing, which culminated in my working for over 17 years at Atari, writing the 3ds Max help.
Right, at Autodesk.
At Autodesk, sorry.
Right.
Autodesk, Atari.
Cool. And what do you do today?
Today, I am retired.
And how do you keep yourself busy?
Lots of things. I ride my bike. I surf the web. I I'm learning Java. I'm learning Android programming. I'm not fully retired. I would be open to a tech writing gig if it seemed interesting. The pay is not an issue at this point, but something that would be interesting, graphics or entertainment related. But that's the thing about that's one of the reasons I was laid off from Autodesk, is that companies are really going away from printed documentation for just about everything. It's not that they're going away from documentation per se. It's online. For example, Modo, their documentation is strictly online. Well, of course, the same for 3ds Max, but they're going away from the traditional type of printed documentation, which, if you look at the 3ds Max help, that's a classic example. And I remember an executive saying something shortly before I left that to the effect that they want to, get away from that sort of learning. How better can they teach their customers how to use their products? And I think they have come to the conclusion that the traditional manuals, whether printed or online, are not really, for whatever reason, just because of the way that they're formatted, that they're structured. We were doing in the last few years that I was there, we were doing a lot with XML. So a lot of it had to do with search engine optimization and just making the help more discoverable, so that people can. Have you ever used 3ds Max, Kevin?
Never, no.
Okay, it's an extraordinarily large program, I think is the best way to put it. There's just a ton of shit in there, and if you want to accomplish a particular task and you're not exactly sure how to do it, and you just open the manual and try to figure it out, unless there's something that's specifically addressed, that's explicitly addressed in the manual, which is unlikely because there's about a million more things that you can do with a program like 3ds Max than it's possible to write about, to address specifically. And I'm talking about different procedures, different ways of combining different processes and things like that. So the chances are for you to be able to discover how to accomplish a certain task just by rooting around in the manual is, it's
right. And what people do now is they go to YouTube and they do how to do such and such in 3ds Max, and that's it, right? That's how they learn.
Well, in my opinion, that's even less helpful, because when you're trying to learn something from a video, it's a very linear thing. It's a very consecutive thing. You can jump around in the video, but then you don't know what came just before where you jumped to. And if it's not something that's very, very specifically targeted at what you want to accomplish, chances are it's not going to help you. Chances are that a more generic description of the tool in a text or a text and graphics manual is going to help you more, but it's still not going to get you all the way there, just because there are so many subtleties and little gotchas in an amazingly complex tool set like 3ds Max. So, and we were working on that. We were working on making these procedures more discoverable, but then they decided to. There were basically two of us writers, and they laid us both off at the same time, and I believe they have someone working in Montreal on the help now, but I'm not really in touch with them now, so I don't know exactly what's going on. But that's where 3ds Max is developed, has been for quite some time in Montreal.
Nice. If you could send a message to the Atari computer users that still exist, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Oh, keep on poking and peeking.
Excellent. Nice. Thank you, David. I have what I need.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you, Kevin, and I appreciate the opportunity. And if there's anything we missed, don't hesitate to get in touch.
If you enjoyed these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.